Welcome to another Black Scorpions review. In today's review we are going to be looking at G&G's F2000, both the railed version and the Hunter scoped version. Now this review for the first time is a second review because I actually did a written review for this weapon about a year ago, and this is almost like an update, if you will, to that. Since we've been doing video reviews, we thought it would be a good idea to actually do a video review of this weapon, especially as this has been the most well used weapon that we've had in the team since we started doing this around a year ago. First of all, we'll talk about the externals. It's all made of a high quality glass reinforced fibre, very similar to the real thing. It doesn't mark easily and it's got a nice matte finish, so no glossy finish or anything like that. There's no creak anywhere on it whatsoever, which is really nice. It's really solid. The whole thing feels really solid and good in your hands. The first thing you'll notice about this weapon, which is to do with the initial actual design of the real thing, is it's very bulky. The actual gun itself is almost twice the width of your average AEG. You've got the pistol grip section there, and then when you actually move to the body it's very wide. Of course, when you actually come to holding it, because you're holding the pistol grip itself and obviously not the bulky body, it doesn't feel any bigger than normal. They are quite heavy. They all weigh around 3.5 kilos, depending on whether you go for the Hunter scope version or the non-scope railed version. Although the balance is very good, it feels heavy in your hands, but once you've actually got it shouldered, it does feel very good. It doesn't feel nearly as heavy as at first, because most of the weight, because of the gearbox being a bullpup design, is actually mounted to the rear. The foregrip, also made of the same material, does feel quite wide at first, although after playing with this now for a year, I find it really comfortable. I actually find this much more comfortable than anything else I've used in the past. Even using vertical foregrips, I find this sort of angled foregrip, if you've used a Magpul AFG or anything like that, you'll be familiar with this sort of angle. It is a very good, comfortable angle to hold it. Metal parts on this are the same as the amount of metal you get on a real thing. So you've got the flash harder, the outer barrel, the gas block assembly, the pin here that releases the upper from the lower receiver, which I'll talk about later, as well as the ejection port cover. Moving on to the controls, if you've ever used a P90 in the past, which in real life is made by the same company, FN Herstal, you'll be familiar with the setup you've got here. Bullpup, the same as a P90, so you've got your grip, pistol grip sort of towards the middle, more to the front than normal, with the magazine well to the rear of the pistol grip. The magazine release is ambidextrous. It's a great big chunky lever that you've got here. You push it straight up and then grab the mag as you've got that, so that's nice and easy to use. Just where you've got your first finger is the fire selector itself. It's sort of perpendicular to the finger with a groove in there for your finger, and it gives a nice positive click for this single shot there and full auto across there. You shouldn't have any accidental clicks because of the position where it is to your finger and the fact that it's a nice positive click on there. Now, something clever that they've done, the same as you'll know from a P90 again if you've used one in the past, is on single shot, that gives you just your normal single, and you'll find that the trigger pull is sort of about halfway. Once you go to full auto, you've got a two-stage trigger, again the same as P90. When you come back to the first click, you'll get a single shot, and you come all the way back for full auto. And this is really good. If you want to go straight to full auto, you just pull the triggers all the way back, full auto. But if you want to take some fewer shots, you have more accurate shots, things like that, I find that I tend to do this a lot when I play. If you do your half trigger pull and you get your single shot, you can put down one at a time for your single shots, just a little bit of enough for suppression, things like that. And then when you need it, straight to full auto. So there's no need to be on single shot unless you're playing a site that requires single shot at all times. As you can see on this one, what I've actually done is the butt pad is rubber, which is good for gripping and things like that. It makes it nice and easy to take on and off. The only downside of that is it can be a bit easy to take off. Now, when I first got this weapon, the first time I took it out, I was playing and then I was crawling and I knocked the butt pad off and then found it on the floor. Luckily I found it, so I think there is a chance that you could lose it. Obviously you knock it on the floor, you don't notice. To remedy this, I've used a little bit of shock cord. There are sling loops on the back of the gun that would use the FN sling that they produced for this weapon specifically. Although I find with this weapon I don't use a sling, it's well balanced, I don't really need it. I've used those sling mounts there to pop the shock cord through, go around the back of the butt pad, and keeps that on. And since I've had that on, I've had absolutely no issues. It's not even come loose, let alone come off and lost it. So it's a nice, quick and easy fix for sorting out that problem. Something unique about G&G's F2000, which is a fantastic feature, is it has an adjustable tension on the spring in the gearbox, so you can adjust your FPS, you can fine tune it to a degree. When we first got this model, it was doing 350 on its lowest setting, and it was doing 450 on its highest setting, which is a bit high for most UK sites. Although it was a 2-minute job to take the spring out and put in a new one, and then we brought it down to 300 at its minimum setting, and at its highest setting there's 370, so that actually covers everywhere I've ever played in the UK, to be honest. The tensioning the spring and changing the spring is really quick. At the back here you've got a nice rubber butt pad which aids in gripping your shoulder when you've got it in that position. You move this off, and at the back here you can see there's a little plate with 2 screws on. You don't need to take that off if you're just adjusting the spring tension. Inside here you've got a big flathead screw, and there's a hole in the centre of that which has an Allen key inside there. Now to adjust the spring tension, this is the only bit, although it comes with an instruction manual that's nice and clear, the only bit that isn't explained very particularly well is this bit. So to increase the tension of the spring and thus increase the FPS of the weapon, you turn the Allen key, tighten it up, so you're going clockwise from this position, moving the Allen key down, which literally moves the entire spring guide and pushes it up and increases the spring tension. Once you've done that, the flathead screw on the top is used to lock off the Allen key so it can't gradually slide back. Obviously you do the reverse of this if you want to lower your FPS. If you want to change the spring quickly, you have 2 screws here, 2 Phillips head screws. You undo both of those, you loosen off this Allen key that you can see in the side of the body just here. That gives you just enough movement that you can pop this little plate out of the way. Then if you undo the flathead screw first and then the Allen key piece, you'll get the spring guide and everything will come straight out the back of the gearbox, and in turn the spring will pop out. This is great as well if you want to work on the internals of the gearbox, because it means that you can take the spring out and you haven't got the tension of the spring when you're trying to pop the 2 halves of the gearbox apart. In order to take the gearbox itself out, all you need to do is loosen off 4 of the Allen keys that you can see on the body here and around here. There's a few of them. It's the 4 nearest. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4. You loosen those off. You don't take them out completely, and that will allow you, once you've taken this plate off with its 2 Phillips head screws, to just slide the gearbox out. Another great thing about the gearbox that they've done, it's because all the trigger mech and everything is on the outside. If you want to fit a MOSFET, which I did do to this one, you don't need to open the gearbox at all, which is nice and quick and handy for fitting a MOSFET. Everything gets soldered onto the outside. Disassembling the rest of the weapon is also very straightforward and much easier than most weapons I've worked on in the past. You've got this big pin here. You push on this, push it all the way through, and that comes out, you can see there. Then this allows you to remove the upper receiver by sliding off the rest of the weapon. And there is the upper receiver and the lower receiver parts. Once you've got the upper receiver removed, here you can see the hop unit at the back. This just slides out, obviously with the inner barrel still attached, so if you ever need to work on that, again, nice and easy to get to. With the hop up, when you need to adjust it, that's actually done from here on this piece, which opens on the real thing. I don't know what the purpose of it is on the real F2000, but on here it's used to access the hop unit, which is really easy, nice and handy to get to the hop unit without any messing about. The hop unit itself is G&G's newer style, which is very good, however it's very stiff. So it can be quite difficult to turn, but once you've got it in its sweet spot, it won't come loose, it won't move. I've had this set up since I got it, haven't touched it once. Hop's been perfect ever since. Once you've got the upper receiver removed, you can then remove the foregrip here. This just pushes straight down. And comes away. Now what we've got here is, because we're covering 2 models of the F2000 that G&G do, we've also got the other upper receiver that they do. This is the non-hunter, the regular version. Now this has a metal rail top, as you can see here, for fitting any RIS type attachments that you want to put on, especially your red dot sights and things like that, scopes. We've also got the RIS rail attachment that they've recently released that replaces the normal plastic foregrip to go on the bottom, which again gives you even more variety of attachments that you'd want to put on. Now this just fits in exactly the same way as obviously you just saw me remove the original plastic foregrip. It pops in from the bottom, push that straight up, and that's your RIS on, and then you can attach either your scoped version or your non-scoped version. Now something else interesting that G&G have done here is if you go for the scoped version, you can remove this cover here and that gets you to the scope. Now what they've done is quite clever because they've attached this scope, which is the one that you can obviously see through there, by the RIS rail that is found underneath. The RIS rail here is plastic rather than the metal one for the actual dedicated RIS version, but it still means that you could remove that, remove the scope off here and still stick a red dot on if you wanted to, giving a bit more versatility. The other interesting thing they've done, because the scope is a separate part, you could potentially stick another scope in through there. As long as you have the height the same, you could put something else in there to use instead of the one it comes with. Although, to be honest, we found the one it comes with has the same reticle as the real F2000, and it also has some of the best eye relief I've actually seen yet. With putting this back on, you pop it back on over the top, make sure the sling mounts in the middle, pop it forward, and there's a little thing that you just heard click there. That little button keeps it back on. Now, this scope, like I say, is one of the best I've used. The eye relief, if you can see on there, we'll have a small picture that comes up, is a good, I mean, that's about 3 or 4 inches, 3 inches perhaps, you can see through there. So absolutely no problems with looking through the scope whilst you've got glasses or even a mask on, and because of the height of it away from the receiver as well, you've got no problems with being able to see through. Optics are very clear and they give a 2x zoom, which is perfect for airsoft, not too much and not too little. Moving on to the internals, the F2000 uses a modified version 6 gearbox, which uses 8mm bearings, giving it a decent rate of fire. That combined with a high torque motor does give a very steady rate of fire. We found even when you crank the spring up to its highest tension and highest FPS as a result, the rate of fire difference is almost negligible. An interesting and very good modification that G&G have done to this gearbox is where you have the corners of the cutout for the cylinder into the gearbox, they've actually drilled little holes, which is really good and prevents cracks from propagating in those corners, which is one of the most common places you'll find cracks starting in a gearbox. Internally, the gearbox parts are all standard parts, with the only exception being the spring guide itself because of the design of the adjustable FPS. The spring guide itself is made of stainless steel and is a bearing type, so I don't see it failing anytime soon. However, if you do have a problem with it and you need a new one, all G&G parts can be ordered directly off their website. Everything else that comes in there is, like I say, it's fairly standard. The piston has one steel tooth and the neck of the second tooth is removed, which just increases reliability at higher ROS. We also found that when you put your finger over the end of the nozzle and you push the piston down, it stops, indicating the system is airtight, which is brilliant for an out-of-the-box gun. Other than the spring guide and the hop-up unit, the only other proprietary part to this weapon is the cut-off lever. Now, the only trouble we had was when we first got the weapon, after a couple of shots, it actually locked up, because the cut-off lever has a flat edge to it. We'll have a picture that comes up that explains what I'm talking about. Because it had a flat piece to it, it was able to lock itself against the trigger neck, which stopped the gun firing and required us to pull the gearbox out the back, unlock them, and then go again. We found that we remedied this pretty quickly. We popped it out, filed it with a needle file, and it took a couple of minutes, put back in. We've been running this for a year now. At every single game we've been to, at least one a month for a year, firing heavy, haven't had a single lock-up since. So that does fix that. We told G&G about it straight away. I know that they fixed the problem initially by hand doing them all as they went out, and as far as I know now, they actually have changed that on their manufacturing process. Other than the initial batch of these that went out just over a year ago, I haven't heard any problems about this since. If you do have an initial one, you still have a problem with it, contact G&G or have a look at our guide that we've got on our written review and take a file to it and fix it. It's not a difficult process. It's also on the external of the gearbox as well, so it's not difficult to get through or anything like that. The motor on this gearbox is at the rear and it's kept in a cage similar to a version 3. The only downside of the modified version 6 that they've used in this weapon is if you look inside the magwell here, you can see where the two halves of the gearbox are kept together. There's a small Allen key bolt there. Now, the problem with this is G&G high caps, which you can see here, and I'll have a picture come up, is the length of this part here is fine, and then with a G&G, sorry, that's a G&G mid cap, with a G&G high cap it's exactly the same length. So there's no problem, it doesn't foul with that bolt that's up there. However, this is a G&P mid cap, and I found the same with TM mid caps, is that because they have a slightly longer top piece here where the spring's kept, where it keeps the BBs in the mag, that bit does foul with the bolt up inside there, and unfortunately means that you can't use other brand or many of the brands mid caps other than G&G's. Now, I've heard that mag mid caps do work, and I've also seen a lot of people have taken their mid caps and cut this section down in order to make it fit. However, I've also seen a couple of people have cut this down and then found that the spring is flying out the back, making the mag unusable. So if you use high caps, any brand high caps, you'll not have a problem. If you use mid caps, if you've got G&G ones, no problem. Mags, I've heard that they work, and I can't say 100% for that, but if you have other brand mid caps, they may not fit. Now, we've told G&G about this problem, and they have said that they want to fix this in the future. So if we get any more news on that, we will update the review on the page on the website and let you know if we've heard anything about that. The F2000 comes in at 703mm for this version, which is their shorter one. They also do a slightly longer one that comes in at 758mm. The inner barrel itself is only 50mm longer on the longer version, but the extra length is mostly due to the longer flash hider that you get. The overall weapon length itself is actually shorter than an M4, however the inner barrel is 430mm in length, so it's actually almost M16 length. Like I say, on the longer version it's 443mm, so it's a little bit longer, but you're not really going to notice a lot out of that extra 13mm. The barrel itself is held very securely inside the outer barrel, there's no wobble, which combined with the fact that it's a 6.04 and the decent hop-up that I mentioned earlier, I found this to be one of the most accurate weapons I've used. The most accurate weapon I've used out of the box, other than this, is G&G's L85, funnily enough, and I'd say these two are on a par. I mean, the only things I've seen are more accurate are things like really upgraded VSRs and things like that, but certainly out of the box and even upgraded M4s and things like that, this has still been more accurate. And it's the first thing that people mention, have noticed when I've played at a lot of games, is that they say, you know, they have a go on it themselves as well, is at how accurate it actually is. Fitting a battery into the F2000 is also very straightforward. As mentioned earlier, you pop off the butt pad and you'll find that to the rear at the bottom you've got it comes with a mini connector. I changed this to Dean's. I prefer Dean's to provide less resistance and a more positive connection. You've got a gap here and here. There's a smaller gap there and a larger gap here. You can fit any size of mini battery in here. We've had up to a 10.8 volt fitted in there, no problems. I tend to use LiPos. I use 1200 milliamp 11.1 volt LiPos, and they fit in here with no problems. You can actually fit a second one in there, so if you're playing a long game, what you can actually do is pop one in there, and when one runs out, pop the back open mid-game, switch the connection over and close it again, which is really handy. Okay, sling mounts on this weapon is something that's been a little controversial about. The sling mounts on this are exactly the same as on the real thing. You have a 2 cut out piece here and one again on the other side. This is where FN's own sling goes through. What it is a loop of material that goes around the weapon like that, provides another loop that you then attach your normal sling to. Now, short of getting an FN one, which isn't likely, unless you're in the US, that's going to be potentially a problem. What I've done in the past is pass a bit of 1 inch webbing through there with a tri-glide loop, ITW Nexus buckle, and that's given me my sling point. On the front, the sling points are much more conventional. You've got 2 holes at front here, depending on which side you'd like to sling it from. And on the Hunter style, you get the old school, again, for your 1 inch webbing to pop through there. So fitting a sling, not necessarily that big of a problem as long as you've got something you can pop around here. I mean, even a piece of paracord passed around and tied off would give you all you'd need for a sling loop. I used to always use a sling until I got this weapon. Once I got this one, I found, because it's so small and it's well balanced, I actually prefer not to use a sling. I can transition from each shoulder much easier without a sling, so it might be something to consider, play with it for a bit and see how you feel. Accessory wise, as you can see, I've got loads of things attached to this. All the rails and everything have had no trouble fitting any accessories that will fit all my other weapons, all other rizzers and bits and pieces. The flash hider is a 40mm negative, which is almost the standard with AEGs. On here I've got the G&G silencer unit fitted, which fits straight on nicely. I've also got an Element PEC 15 and a M3 torch there, and a dual switch on the other side. And then I've got a Real Airtech slapped on the top there. Everything fits on, absolutely no problems, and a TDI Arms vertical foregrip. So no trouble there, and everything fits on very nicely. G&G have recently released a couple of accessories for their F2000 series. One of which we actually have is the Riz, which is beautifully made, really nicely finished. There are not any imperfections on any of it. Well, I'll have a close-up picture of this, you can really see it. really nicely done. Now the only thing I would say that's not necessarily a criticism is it's really quite heavy. I mean the gun's already quite heavy, like I said earlier, around 3.5 kilo mark. The Riz makes it even heavier. Luckily, due to the balance of the gun that I also mentioned earlier with the Orcs being at the back, means the balance still isn't thrown off. If anything, it's actually more balanced rather than the weight being to the rear, so it is okay. I played with it for the first time yesterday down in Drakelow Tunnels in Worcester, and found it was fine. I didn't have any troubles with it. Was a little bit worried about the extra weight, but it was absolutely fine. They've also laser etched onto these sides and onto the bottom the little markings. You've got left, right, and B for bottom markings with the numbers, which is again a really nice touch, which makes it look a bit nicer. The teeth that go through and attach themselves to the upper receiver once that's slid on is actually metal rather than plastic. Now the only downside of this is if you intend to remove the upper receiver a lot, take it on and off all the time, there's not really many reasons you wouldn't want to do that, but if you did, say you had 2 uppers and you want to keep switching it for indoors and outdoor play, because of the metal teeth on the Riz, they do score into the glass fibre on the upper receiver, which over time may become a problem. It may start to make this a little bit loose. I can't confirm that, but it's just possibly something to look out for. In the UK, the G&G F2000 railed version comes in at £315, and the scoped or hunter version, as they call it, comes in at £335. Now, in the box, as well as the weapon itself, you get a 450 round G&G high cap, and on the railed version, you also get a flip-up rear sight and a Riz attachment front sight, which obviously I've removed here in order to put the accessories on. Now, as I said before, I've been using this gun for about a year now, and I think it's worth mentioning that I've not actually had, touch wood, a single failure of any component, either internal or external. I'd hate to think how many BBs I put through this in the last year. I fired a lot and played a lot of games, but like I say, I've not actually had any problems. I even, at a Cope Hill Down game, managed to jump out of the 2nd level Sanger, completely mess up and throw the weapon, which landed barrel first and bounced about 4 times, what seemed like slow motion, as I thought it was going to be utterly destroyed. Fortunately, I picked the gun up, dusted it off because there was a lot of crap on it, got all the rubbish out the end of the barrel, and luckily it actually fired absolutely fine, still fired straight. The real EOTech on top did keep it 0, which to be honest I expected, and the gun still fired true to the sight, so I was very impressed with that, and certainly relieved. Now originally when I did the written review for this weapon around a year ago, the price at the time was around £400. I don't know exactly why the price has dropped. I don't know if it's because of limited availability at the time, combined with popularity, which is why maybe people were charging more for it. But it's now £315. Now at the time I thought £400 was a lot of money. That put it up there with the Masada and other sort of high-end weapons, and not that. There seems to be a bit of a void between the £300 price tag and then you go up to the sort of £1,000 for PTWs and support weapons. At £400 there isn't many weapons, and I thought at £400, although it was steep and it does have a few drawbacks, some of which have now been fixed by the time it's taken to actually do this weapon, I thought it was still worth it. Out of all the weapons I've got about 25, 30, I don't even know how many AEGs now. This one is hands down my favourite still. It's been an absolute pleasure to use it for the last year, and I have no intention of stopping using it anytime soon, so I'll still be using it as my primary AEG from here onwards. So I believe at £315 it's even better value for money. The things like the adjustable FPS, which if you play at a lot of different sites like myself and my team have done in the last 12 months, that is an absolute godsend. It doesn't matter where I go, as long as I've got a screwdriver and an Allen key, I ruck up the site, go through the chrono, I'm too high, too low, give it a bit of a tweak, chrono again, and I'm almost spot on for the site that I need to be at. There aren't many other guns you can do that, and certainly not that easily. I've not shown this weapon to a single person and not had that person be impressed with it, even more so when people actually give it a go. The only people that haven't liked this weapon have been people that just don't like the look of it because they reckon it looks like a fish or something like, you know, that's fine, but everyone I've shown it to at least appreciates the engineering and the abilities of the weapon itself, especially for an out-of-the-box weapon. So I do believe it represents good value for money and is possibly one of the best out-of-the-box AEGs I've ever had. This has been another Black Scorpions review. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more reviews of weapons, accessories and sights around the country, please visit our website at www.blackscorpions.co.uk.